All right. Please, shall we start, ma'am? Students may join.
Yeah, I'm ready whenever you are.
Nisha?
Yes, ma'am. Sophia, you must start.
Okay, ma'am. Good evening to all. It gives me immense pleasure to extend to you a very warm welcome on behalf of the Department of Chemistry and Center for Research, St. Teresa's College, Ernakulam, in association with Institution Innovation Council, IIC, and Theresian IEDC, who has clubbed all of us for the international workshop on entrepreneurship and innovation as a career opportunity. Entrepreneurship is the most aspired skill of today's times that allows students to learn more and bridge the gap between real life skills and skills taught at institutions. So, let's start today's program with a silent prayer. Now, I invite Ms. Nisha TP, Department Coordinator of Theresian IIC, to deliver the welcome address.
Thank you, Sophia. Good evening, one and all. It gives me immense warmth and great pleasure to grace all of your presence in the interest of the entire committee. I feel tremendous contentment in welcoming all of you to this international workshop on entrepreneurship and innovation as a career opportunity, organized by the Department of Chemistry and Center for Research in association with Theresian Institution and Innovation Council, IIC, and Innovation and Entrepreneurship Development Cell, IEDC. Institution Innovation Council is actually an initiative of Ministry of Human Resource Development, MHRD, Government of India, established to systematically foster the culture of innovation amongst all higher education institutions. The primary mandate of IIC is to encourage, inspire, and nurture young students by supporting them to work with new ideas and transform them into prototypes while they are in formative years. While IEDC, the Innovation and Entrepreneurship Development Center, is an initiative of Kerala Startup Mission under Startup Bootcamp Scheme of Government of Kerala. The mission of the IECDs is to develop institutional mechanism to create entrepreneurial culture in academic institutions and to foster growth of innovation and entrepreneurship among the faculty and students. Theresian IIC and IEDC has been constantly working on imparting these visions to the young minds and nurture them to hold up their own phases of professional life. And the intended outcome of today's program is to impart basic ideas on entrepreneurship, to motivate and to give hope to students in selecting their career as entrepreneur or innovator. The event also envisions to create an impression in the students on how to identify their slot as an entrepreneur by themselves and to know basic things about one should know during the launch of a startup or they themselves come as an entrepreneur or an innovator. So coming to my duty vested upon me, first of all, I welcome, even in their absence, Reverend Dr. Sister Vinita, Professional Superior and Manager, St. Teresa's College, Reverend Sister Emily, Director, St. Teresa's College, and Dr. Lizzie Matthew, Principal of St. Teresa's College, to this event. With great pleasure and with great pride on behalf of the entire Theresian family, I am honored to welcome our speaker for today's event, Dr. Sandhya Balasubramanian from University of Massachusetts, USA. On behalf of the college, I extend my gratitude to Dr. Sandhya for accepting our invitation without any hesitation or second thought. She is the very right person for such an event, who is very resourceful in the field of building ideation for entrepreneurship or innovation among both students and business personnel. We welcome you, ma'am. I now welcome the head of the Department of Chemistry, Dr. Jaya T. Worky, to this event, who with a great support, constant inspiration, suggestions, and guidance given to us as and when required. Welcome, ma'am. I welcome all the faculty members of the Department of Chemistry and other departments of the college. Also, I especially mention and welcome the faculties from other institutions and colleges who have joined here, who showed a profound interest in participation to this event. Last but not the least, I welcome all the students and research scholars of both Theresian family and outside institutions to the event. And once again, I welcome each and every one of you to this workshop. Hope every one of you will find this webinar fruitful in one way or the other. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Joining us today is a superwoman who loves to help young adults like us to follow our heart, search for change, and explore entrepreneurship as a dynamic combination of knowledge and skill. I invite Dr. Jayati Worki, Head of Chemistry Department, to introduce our speaker for today's workshop.
Thank you, Sophia. Good morning to our chief guest, Dr. Sandhya, and good evening to all other participants. With immense pleasure, let me introduce our chief guest today. Dr. Sandhya Balasubramanian is currently as the Assistant Dean of Academic and Corporate Program Development and Adjunct Faculty, Manning School of Business at the University of Massachusetts, USA. Dr. Sandhya holds a PhD in Business Administration, specializing in entrepreneurship from UMass Lowell. Her research areas are in entrepreneurial universities, orientation, early stage ventures, and team coherence and performance. Her areas of expertise also include developing and implementing new strategic initiatives and programs in higher education. In her current role, Dr. Sandhya leads development, launch, and continuous improvement of new academic, corporate, and non-credit program offerings to enhance the graduate and international student recruitment and retention. Throughout her career, Dr. Sandhya has worked in various capacities in higher education, implementing new programs aimed at leveraging benefits for students. She has collaborated successfully across higher education institutions and engaged stakeholders in meaningful partnerships. Before joining Lowell University, Dr. Sandhya served as a professor and chairperson of department specializing in business and corporate studies for several years at Vaishnav College, India. Ma'am, we are fortunate to have such a great personality as our resource person. With this brief introduction, let me welcome Dr. Sandhya Balasubramanian to this function. Thank you, ma'am. Please.
Thank you very much. Again, both to Dr. Nisha and Dr. Jaya for this invitation. I'm very honored and I'm glad to be here to share some interesting tidbits. And I think, Dr. Nisha, in your introduction, you kind of gave a good introduction in the sense that I'm not going to be talking about specific strategies of how do you go and raise money and where your resources are, but we are going to start encouraging students to do some introspection to understand where their mindset is, so that no matter what career they pursue, they're going to be entrepreneurial in their thinking, okay? And that is the more successful long-term strategy, all right? Thank you very much. If I'm hoping that my connection will continue to stay stable. I already got dropped off once. If such a thing should happen, don't panic, I will reappear. I might just relocate to another location where I know the connection is stable. Okay, so just heads up in case I do the disappearing act. You know that I'm not checked out for the day. All right. So let's start with the presentation, and we'll at any point feel free to just stop and raise your hand and speak out loud, because with the two screens, sometimes I don't get to see the faces of people on the meeting today. So in case there is an issue, I'm hoping that Dr. Jaya or Nisha can just speak up, interrupt me in the conversation if a student wants to discuss more. All right.
Yes,
thank you. With that said, let's start with the presentation. Share my screen. Can you tell me if you're seeing my presentation, or is it my notes section that you're seeing?
So, ma'am, we can see your first slide.
Are you seeing next slides and
No, the first slide.
view, or is it just
No,
the
no,
view of the
it's
slide?
not the presenter view. The first slide. No.
All right. Okay. What do you see now?
It's entrepreneurial mindset profile. The second
Okay.
slide.
And
Yes, this is the first slide, I think.
sorry?
It's correct
It's
now.
correct.
The first slide, I think, is.
Yeah, the most so I'm asking in terms of the view. I want to ensure that the students get to see the presentation view and not the speaker notes view.
Okay.
It's with,
Okay.
yes.
If I swap, what do you see now? Hello?
It's the first slide alone, ma'am. Like the workshop slide.
It's the brochure
About-
slide. Brochure slide
Yeah,
is
brochure slide.
Okay. So
now it is the first slide.
okay.
And the person mindset profile.
Okay. And you're not seeing next slide and the notes section, right?
No, only one slide is. You
All
can
right, great
change
then.
the second.
Perfect. So let's get started. And again, thank you for the opportunity. Today we'll spend a lot of time trying to understand a little more about what it takes to be an entrepreneur, and what are some success strategies that you can adopt irrespective of the career that you pursue. All right. That said, basic housekeeping notes are for all of you. As you get started, get situated, please just turn off your microphone. And it's always good to have your camera enabled, but we understand that you have other challenges. But actively engage in conversation during the entire session. During the presentation, I do have some activity planned for you. So you might be well placed if you have a old-fashioned pen and paper at your disposal, so that you can just write down some notes for you to take home with you at the end of the day. All right. That said, we always talk about entrepreneurship and all these things, but stepping back a little bit, one of the circumstances in which we are living, and especially in the last 18 to 20 months, what we have experienced, not only in our personal life but in the world around, and it's not in the immediate world, it's not in the immediate city or town, but across the world, there is so much volatility, there is uncertainty, and the complexity of things are never reducing. It's just incrementally increasing on a day-by-day basis. And all this is resulting in very, very increased levels of ambiguity. As students, you are probably in a situation where you might not have imagined that this is how your academic life and your 3 years in college were going to be. Probably most of you for those of you who started in 2020, you have not spent the amount of time and hours kind of having fun in a college campus as you might have envisioned. So all this kind of creates a lot of challenge and a lot of questions in your mind about, with this kind of a preparation, what am I going to do? How am I going to contribute? Some of us are eager to respond to this complexity and uncertainty that's happening. And the more success always happens when you try to make a positive impact, to reduce the amount of uncertainty and ambiguity in your world, and take on the complexity so that you can bring back some steady state into your life. So with that context, I just wanted to give a quick outline of what our conversation for today is going to be. Primarily, we'll focus on the skills that are needed for employability, because that is the mantra. You hear that from your parents, you hear that from your teachers. Even a guest speaker like me who comes on says, what are you going to do about your future, right? And while we're talking about employability, the conversation that is unavoidable is about how can you be entrepreneurial, and where is innovation happening, because that sets the tone for the future. Because nobody likes to be in a steady state. Nobody wants to be betting on a horse that is not going to win. You all want to be successful, and entrepreneurial thinking and innovative activities are great ways to ensure that your future is secure. So when we talk about entrepreneurship and innovation, we always have to understand what are the factors that influence your choice, whether you're going to be employed in a company, are you going to have your own organization that you are going to be in charge. All these things involve a careful choice based on the life and circumstances that you are living in. And to be able to tackle that, my focus always is, let's look internally within ourselves. Not worried about the money that you're going to get, and don't worry about when is the right moment to jump into this. Let's just step back. You are all so young, and the world is, the life and times is ahead of you. The world is waiting for you to come and contribute. So let's take some time to think about, what about your mindset? What is the right type of entrepreneurial mindset that will ensure that no matter what you do, you're going to bring that entrepreneurial thinking to your work environment, to your life and circumstance around you, to influence in a positive way the impact that you create in the society. That said, one of the basic success secrets, always we say, is being alert. Right? And this is what makes a significant difference between people who are successful and people who are not there yet. And I never say anybody, no one is not successful, because it is like if you're on a train, people get off and get on on every station. If you are on the train, you know that your destination is going to arrive at some time. So you just have to wait for your correct exit point, your entry point, and your exit point. And this involves a lot of alertness. Now, I know it is probably around 6:30 in the evening. You're all probably tired after a busy day. So here is a quick wake-up exercise. I want you to pay attention for the next 2 minutes, and then we'll have some active discussion about whether your alertness is kind of primed and ready to go. All right. I'm going to play a quick video. Tell me if you're able to hear it. I want you to watch carefully. There are questions at the end of it. Okay. Hold on. The video wouldn't play today. Can you just let me pull up another screen so that you can view this? It's just one of those tricky days. Sorry about that, guys.
It's okay, ma'am. No problem.
Yep, it's coming up. Let's share the screen. Can you see the YouTube screen now?
Yes, it's visible. It's visible.
Okay. Okay, pay attention and see what's happening.
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts at precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
But how did you know?
Madam, as any horticulturist will tell you, one does not plant petunias until May is out. Take her away. It's just a matter of observation. The real question is, how observant were you?
So here's the question for you. Did you notice the 21 changes?
Clearly, somebody in this room murdered Lord Smythe, who, at precisely 3:34 this afternoon, was brutally bludgeoned to death with a blunt instrument. I want each of you to tell me your whereabouts and precisely the time that this dastardly deed took place.
I was polishing the brass in the master bedroom.
I was buttering his lordship's scones below stairs, sir.
But I was planting my petunias in the potting shed.
Constable, arrest Lady Smythe.
So, this is like a very fun video. It kind of jokes around, but I think there is a very, very fundamental rationale that they're sharing with you, an important lesson for life, that if you are going about your life in a way that you're just leading your life, just if you stop and look around you, so many things change, right? And sometimes these are big changes that happen that you cannot miss. Sometimes they're very, very small changes, subtle changes that you probably are just overseeing. You're overlooking a lot of these things in our everyday life. Take, for example, we all went about our life till someday in mid-March 2020, the world just stopped, right? And that was a change that we could not dismiss. COVID hit us and our life as we knew it just stopped. But how often does that kind of a change happen? Not too often, right? But in an everyday basis, if you travel from your home to your school and college and back, so many things are happening in the world around you, from your neighbors who are buying a new car, to when you come into the college, your faculty, there are new faculty members who come in, there is a new building that happens in the college, there is good faculty members who relocate, you and your parents relocate to another place. So there are so many changes that happen in an everyday life. And a big part of being successful is essentially trying to be aware of your circumstances in a manner that it really makes a lot of sense, right? And so let's go back to sharing our presentation, and hopefully swap this place. Are we back at the PowerPoint presentation right now?
Yes, ma'am. Yes.
All right. Okay. So if you look at the changes, right from the flowers here, the good news is, being an educational video, they showed you all the changes that were happening. The picture behind changed. The person who was playing dead changed. All these things are very, very critical to understanding what's going on around you. So the whole topic of today's conversation, and you might be thinking, what is this, what kind of a resource person? She's not even talking about employability. She's not talking about entrepreneurship. Instead, she's kind of trying to tell me that the world around me changes. Well, that's partly my job, is to say, in this whole rat race of everybody telling you, right from the time you probably started in middle school, people have been telling you, what are you going to do? What are you going to become? Where are you going to go to work? How much money are you going to earn? And you are, as students, coming into this whole funnel, trying to get hired by some company so that you can have a living. And well, I'm not saying any of those ideas are wrong, but during this process of running through this employability mill, if you don't stop to take notice of the world around you, you will be sadly left behind. In a typical search process, you're currently in this process where you're learning about yourself, you're learning about your chemical concepts, and so that you can be a good chemist in the future. Many of you might have other plans. You might pursue higher education. Some of you might go on to be employed in a company, and some of you, we hope, will contribute to setting up a new startup, right? And the typical startup process, you do all these things, you find out what you want to do, and go into the job search process. and you can easily have a chance to work at any one of these organizations, right? I'm going to throw a bunch of logos here. And many of these are very, very familiar, right? If you look at Tata Consultancy Service, you look at Honeywell, there are big companies, there are small companies, there are science-based companies, there are non-scientific companies, but the choice is unlimited, especially in a country like India, where the economy is booming. At least it was before the pandemic, and now we are probably set up in a manner where we will reach that pinnacle again. But the choices are unlimited. So as a student, most people will say, oh, well, your generation, it's all well made for you. The choice is easy. You want to apply for a job, you can easily get a job. But then with so many companies to work for, you need to understand which ones are you actually interested in. And that is based on who you are as a person and what type of skill sets you bring. So all your life, you've been trying to get your academic skills in order. But when you talk about employability, I'm sure your career center talks about this also, saying, let's start talking about interpersonal skills. How do you communicate with people? Where are your personal qualities? And broadly, for any person to be employed, there are 3 different domains in which we look at skill sets. Okay, your applied knowledge, what you acquire in your classroom, right from when you started going to school till today, whatever has been taught to you, kind of equips you with the applied knowledge. Beyond that, you need to have good, effective working relationships with people. You must be able to communicate well with people. But then comes this whole new area of workplace skills. How are you going to take existing resources, add more information to it in a manner that you can effectively utilize it for the benefit of the organization that you work for? So this must be easy, right? And so working for another person, people often say these are the skill sets that you need. But then we are introducing 2 new concepts for you, saying we are going to talk about being entrepreneurial, creating startups and being on your own. Our question often becomes, where does that entrepreneurship skills and where do the innovation aspect of what you do come into this big giant ball of all the skill sets that you need? If you look at it, again, awareness here, we were talking about employability skills, and now to go into an entrepreneurial environment where your outcome is going to be a startup of your own, take all the skills that you need to be employed and add 2 more. One is your ability to innovate constantly, and the second one is to be entrepreneurial in your thinking. Now let's look further into seeing what is innovation and what is entrepreneurship. And the best analogy I often give is innovation is developing something new and better, right? It always has the potential to drive value to customers. Innovations include concepts, processes, and a number of products and services that you're probably going to be producing over time. And on the other hand, if you take the potential and apply it to an active outcome, to creating an outcome by assembling resources, then that is entrepreneurship. For those of you who are car enthusiasts, it's the difference between having a Ferrari and actually driving one to victory, right? A car has immense potential, but without a driver, it's a waste of time. So innovation is like the Ferrari that we all drive, and it takes an entrepreneur to actually look at something that is new and a wow area to say, what can I make out of this in a tangible format that can impact the lives of other people? That said, we are trying to do all these things that we're talking about in entrepreneurship, talking about innovation. And our assumption is that you're going to do all these things in India, right? And you might be doing this in the broader world, but for the benefit of everybody, I'm just going to scale back and speak specifically in the context of how this can contribute to the Indian economy. before the pandemic, these were the estimates saying India is one of the fastest growing economies in the world. It's greatest in terms of so many different things. Look at every sector across the board, right from e-commerce to number of people who travel. All these things are great metrics for you to assess the growth in the economy. But then you might say, well, we were so good before 2020 February, but what about now? Everywhere you see there is a significant setback in who we are as a nation, right? And you're struggling in some ways because we are still fighting COVID actively. But look at the forecast. The future is still optimistic in the sense that when you compare India to the rest of the world over the next 3 years, the projection for India is that we are going to continue to grow. And by 2022, even though in 2021 we'll do a big recovery to compensate for the 2020 setbacks that we had in GDP, but if you look at how we are poised, the outlook is very, very optimistic. And the world is just waiting for your young minds to come in and take over the country and ensure that it continues to stay in this, keep this positive stride. In terms of grow the share of India in the global entrepreneurship activities level, you know, historically, a lot of us, including my generation, we were all kind of trained to think about finding employment and they always said, find a stable employment, go and work for the government because that ensures that your life is secure for the next 30 years. But your generation of young professionals who are going to emerge are looking to have a vibrant and challenging atmosphere where you are able to make positive impact on society. And if you look at India's growing share, it is so fast that for among all the countries outside of US, India is almost number 2 in terms of global venture deals. When you talk about venture deals, it is the number of venture capitalists who are actively engaged in investing in startup companies. So they give you the money to start your company and grow your companies. And if you look at it, look at the number of cities where you can see venture capital deals. 6 out of the so many Indian cities that are actively promoting entrepreneurship activity are among the top 20 global cities for venture capital deals. And that's amazing compared to all the different stories that you hear about entrepreneurs struggling without money. So there is a lot of recognition. So the time is almost right for all of you to start thinking about how can you contribute to the world. But how can you contribute to the world? It all comes about choice. You, on one end, you have all these mega organizations where you can just join, get up in the morning, have your breakfast, go to work, do something that you're ordered to do, have fun, come back, party, go back to work again. This life cycle can continue. And as young adults who hold the future key to the country's success, your choices are unlimited. And people often say you're young people, you have to make all these differences. You don't operate in a vacuum, right? The challenge and the opportunity and the positivity in the whole thing is that you come in with your set of aspirations and empowerment, and there are a number of factors that contribute to what outcomes you're going to pursue, what opportunities you gravitate towards. And this is about the participation in decision making, the kind of education you receive, the entrepreneurial training, and once you're thinking about all these things, whether it is employment, whether it is entrepreneurship, creating a startup, your behavior, your attitude towards this is whatever career you pursue is very, very critical. The kind of skills training, if I'm a thoroughbred management professional. Suddenly tomorrow, if I want to start a biotech company, I don't have the skill sets to do that. So I might have to go back and start learning about some of those chemical structures that you probably have right in your back pocket. Vice versa, you probably wondering about how am I going to tally my accounts if I start a company. So there is always an amount of skill training that is required. And then with good mentors, the path towards pursuing either employment or entrepreneurship becomes clearer and clearer. But then it would be nice if this is all there is to worry about, right? But we live in a society and a world where there are so many factors within the environment which we call enabling environment. And some of you might chuckle and say, is the environment always enabling? I know when you say an environment, it can enable, but at the same time it can pose constraints as well. And that is where it comes into where you are with your entrepreneurial mindset, whether you take and look at the environment and say, well, there is a challenge, but this is how I'm going to overcome it or not. So there are lots of factors in the surrounding environment that influence whether you are going to pursue employment, whether you're going to pursue entrepreneurship, and whether or not you're going to be successful in one or the other. That said, breaking down those factors more closely, if you are thinking about, I want to start a company, I want to be part of a small new venture, there are a number of factors, and let's look at some of them a little more closely, because this has a significant impact on how you make a choice. The broader enabling environment, whether the government policies are conducive, all those things come secondary. But first thing is your background, your exposure to people who are self-employed. Have your parents tried out something? Have they risk averse? What kind of family support that you get? What about your own personality? What is your home context? And we often say, going through the entrepreneurial thought process, you might be thinking of something now, but the good thing is there is no age limit for anybody to be an entrepreneur. You can be an entrepreneur at 21, you can be an entrepreneur at 51, you can be an entrepreneur at 81. So when you're talking about the home context, it changes. At this young age where you are in your 18 to 22, your parents are the biggest influence. As you go through the stages, from the parents being the biggest influence, then it becomes your friend circle, then it becomes your better half, your spouse, her family or his family, and the enabling environment, as we broadly call it, just increases in complexity. So you have to think about all these factors and how they factor into your own decision making as to whether you're going to pursue an employment or whether you're going to pursue an entrepreneurial career in the form of creating a startup. And then the technology and markets. Remember, we started off with this VUCA world where it's volatile, it's complex, it's ambiguous, and it's uncertain. And a big part of that comes from the technology where we are and how the market is responding. A year back, nobody knew about some of these startup companies like Moderna. For those of us in the Massachusetts, Boston area, Moderna was a company that we kind of knew because they were making waves in the local community. But beyond that, not too many people were worried about Moderna, but now they are so famous after they responded with the Moderna vaccine that takes care of COVID-19, right? So what is happening in the technology? The solutions we did not have 20 months ago are now commonplace. In February 2020, if somebody had said vaccine, we were all thinking polio vaccine, smallpox vaccine, chickenpox vaccine. Now when you say vaccine, nobody thinks of those three vaccines. They just talk about COVID-19 vaccine, right? So there is always a constant change in the environment, and you have to think about what type of technology is influencing it and what kind of institutional support you can get. There is a lot. We discussed a little bit where private investors may provide support for your startup ventures, but then there are lots of incubators that help you be successful as you're learning the ropes of being entrepreneurial. Beyond that, governmental support is very, very critical. And the Institution Innovation Council itself is a great example of government and governmental support, because they are trying to encourage student entrepreneurship. That is why they are investing in the colleges, so that we can help shape your mindset and approach towards entrepreneurship. That said, I always say most of us get our inspiration for being entrepreneurial from the movies, right? And I think I did a good job. I put in the right mix of movies, I hope. This is as dramatic as it sounds, nobody knows we cannot create a startup in 3 hours. The movie makes it a very, very rapid pace. But how does somebody start creating something new? It is often the inspiration behind that. That is what these movies capture, and they take the life and times of a person. Even though an entrepreneur doesn't wake up every day to a dramatic sunrise, what the Bollywood, Collywood, whatever we call it, what they do is a good job of capturing that particular point at which you are really responding to a shock. And if you look at the take off all the masala from the movies and look at what they're talking in terms of startups, they're essentially showing you the story of a potential entrepreneur who has a lot of opportunities, knowledge and skills, and they go from this conceptual idea stage to setting up a company. They create the startup is formed at some point where they are involved in the very act of setting up business, right? And I often say, I don't know what it is called in Malayalam, but the Tamil equivalent of Tamil equivalent of that movie was Surarai Potru, right? The Surya movie. And you can see that if you just visualize the movie back in the day, for those of you who have watched it, or if it's a good weekend activity, go ahead and watch it. You can see that they are essentially walking you through team formation stages. And there are a group of friends who form a company, go through a lot of hurdles. There is an enabling environment or a disabling environment for on certain days, right? And then you set up a business, there is a conception stage, there is a firm birth stage, and a persistent stage, right? And this is what is the journey of an entrepreneur. And there are a number of factors that influence the success of this, including the profile of the entrepreneur, right? What are your individual attributes? What is your gender? What is your motivation? Which industry are you focusing towards? Some industries, like the one in the movie, it's a aerospace industry. There are too few players, right? And there is a lot of regulation. Likewise, if you look at biotech, there might be a lot of regulation. But if you're talking about a Uber or a Lyft, then the kind of regulations that you have to live with are very, very different. So the industry, the type of industry you jump into makes a lot of interest in influence on how long it takes for you to go from firm birth to persistence. So this entire process is the startup team formation process, and it can be a short process that you can capture in 2 hours in a movie, or it can take 20 hours for someone to actually go from an initial thought process to somewhere where you're successful and your business is flourishing. And oftentimes, and I say this is something that I emphasize, because entrepreneurship is not a very, very planned activity. In some ways, it is a little bit of, there is a spark, that is what they capture. That is where the charm is about entrepreneurship, in the sense that you are always in creating an entrepreneurial venture in response to some inspiration. Oftentimes, it is in response to an exogenous shock. And I'm using the focus on the exogenous shock. When I say exogenous shock, when you say exogenous, it means a shock that is caused from outside. It is not me getting 15 out of 100 in an exam and then saying, what did I do to myself? That's an endogenous shock. I created the situation for myself. But an exogenous shock is a situation where you have no control over what you're going to experience. And the 3 stages of processing exogenous shocks, like the COVID-19 outbreak, is first processing the shock. You just stop and say, what's happening in this world? And then you look internally around your resources, because what happens when a shock is created is there is a lot of resource mindfulness that happens. Okay. And I'm sure you all had a hearty laugh when you heard about the toilet paper shortage in the US, right? How did people process the COVID-19 shock in the United States? They went on a toilet paper buying spree, right? And soon the store shelves were empty, and nobody understood the connection between COVID-19 and toilet paper shortage, but that is how certain people process their shock. And some people, on the other hand, they looked internally at the power of frugality. One of the things that COVID-19 reinforced for us was the importance of hygiene. and the importance of good, clean water to just wash your hands. And I know, coming from India, I felt like it was finally a deja vu moment, because in the US, hygiene has a different definition. We come from a very tropical country in India, where if you go outside and you come back, your parents are probably chasing you, saying, go and change your dress, go wash your feet, wash your hands, wash your face, because we are used to a high level of bacteria and contamination in the environment. In the US, on the other hand, I always cringe when people wear their shoes and walk inside the house, a house which is made has floor to floor carpet. I just think about the amount of germs that will be there. But in certain parts of the world, they took internal resources, the power of frugality. You didn't have to set up a huge plumbing expedition, but they quickly attached a pipe to a tub of water and they utilized it. So there is a power to frugality. And then looking inside and looking for emotional support. So this is the story of what happened in Italy, where they were in severe lockdown mode. And we all know that Italy is a country that is vibrant with activity and music. And the big balcony concerts became a kind of an Instagram and I don't know what, the Snapchat or YouTube that you all follow. This was a big sensation as to how this country as a whole responded to providing that emotional support. In each case, this is how people respond. And you have to look internally to say, how am I going to respond to a situation where I have the opportunity to make a difference? Okay. That said, let's go back to some of the fundamentals. I have some more fun activities coming through for you. I think we are at almost halfway mark. So talking quickly, the team formation process, we spoke about that in the context of the movie itself. But essentially, there are a number of factors, including your experience and social capital, your personality, that is thrown into a churner where a number of team processes who you're engaging with, everything is kind of comes together. What are the different teams' emergent states? Because no single person jumps into entrepreneurship on their own. You're trying to work together as a team to produce a lot of outcomes for your own company. It involves sales growth, it includes profitability, how many employees you have. So this is like a moving target. And people have to understand that when you say startup, it is a journey where you will begin at one point and reach your destination at any. For some people it is 6 months, some people it is 6 years, for some people it is 16 years. So this whole framework provides you a look into so many different underlying factors. In the earlier slide, we looked at some of the very, very tangible factors. Here, they are much more underlying factors that influence team startup. That said, different types of entrepreneurship, and we are not, I don't want you to panic. I'm not going to walk through these 10 different things, one thing at a time, but quickly scroll, look at the slides deck and think about an example where you have an ideal opportunistic entrepreneurship. Okay, and the Italy balcony concert, if only somebody had paid money for that, would be a great opportunistic entrepreneurship. Look at how people responded to that exogenous shock, where you could not go into a restaurant to eat. So there were so many more delivery services which took food from a restaurant to your home. There are environmental entrepreneurship, where when we're talking about, there are so many people who are contributing to producing clean energy and clean water in a manner that makes a difference to the environment. Think of all the places which are talking about recyclability of plastics, right? So those are, there is a quick snapshot. You could find your entrepreneurship solution in any one of these ways. But then what is more important is understanding this big journey. And I will probably share the slide back with you through Dr. Nisha and Dr. Jaya. But an entrepreneur's journey is essentially living through life in a manner that you start thinking about an idea, figure out what is missing, and get your idea, get a prototype in place, get buy-in for your ideas so that it's first a small group, and then you get money to scale this organization into something big, and then you keep growing and growing, growing till you reach success. Plain and simple, this is the startup journey. And you might think, why is she talking about this? And I thought we were going to talk about how to set a startup. And my focus is not in that output experience. It is more how each person enjoys the entrepreneurial journey. Okay. See, if you look at this slide, it seems a very, very busy slide, and it seems very process oriented. But I like to interpret it as, from an internal perspective, where is your journey as an entrepreneur? What is your motivation? Think about why you want to become an entrepreneur. What is it in your preparation that helps you become an entrepreneur? What is the idea that you plan, right? And what resources do you have? Some people, resources can be physical resources, it can be monetary resources, it can be other emotional support and people resources. It can vary. And then you develop a business plan. The business plan, when you see, it is the fifth step in the whole process. And only if you have the other 4 steps in some sort of order can you start writing a business plan. So business plan is but a tangible way of showing that I know how to articulate about my ideas. But without inspiration, without the adequate preparation, you're not going to go too far. And then you go through the right directions in the enabling environment, and then you launch, right? So I'm bringing it back to personalizing this thought process for you. Think about, why should you become an entrepreneur? And I'm hoping that I have captured some of the answers that you might want to respond to. And most people think if you become an entrepreneur, you can get rich. Well, you're not reporting to anybody, right? So you don't want to have a boss. You don't want a boss at all, and you want unlimited vacation. And some people will say, because my parents want me to do that. And on this side is where I think most of you will gravitate towards saying, I am inspired by a role model. I have an unconventional idea that I know no other organization here does it. I hate being in corporate India. That could be an answer. So each person has to think back and say, what is my motivation? Figure out that motivation to become an entrepreneur. But what are the characteristics of entrepreneurship, right? That's, you have your motivation, but what characteristics embody an entrepreneur is a very, very important internal story that you have to learn about. And in that case, what you think about here is to say, do I have the leadership skills? Am I willing to learn from my mistakes? Am I willing to put in 48 hours in a 24-hour day to pursue my my passion? Do I have the physical stamina to do that? Where are my ideas? What is the competition I'm facing? How do I respond to problems? All these things are very, very critical for you to understand. And in each of these cases, no two people will have the same answer. And if you take this in a box and shake it and say, how is one person different from the other? It is the proportion of tolerance to certain problems and the willingness to take on certain opportunities. And it'll come in a very, very mixed bag. No two people will probably have the same rating on a scale. Now, compare what we looked at in the initial stages as employability versus what it takes to be an entrepreneurship. And I often say the answer is in the mindset, okay? And there are a lot of mindset dimensions that you have to think about. It is about the future orientation. It is about your comfort with risk. We'll go into greater detail about what this takes, but employability is much more well-defined rather than entrepreneurial mindset, because the mindset is defined as an established set of attitudes held by someone, right? And that is so unique as your own DNA. Okay, no two people will have the same type of mindset. You might find somebody who is who's like-minded. That's a word that we often hear, saying I'm friends with this person because she and I think alike, or he and I think alike. But there is a lot more to entrepreneurial mindset when you boil it down to the individual level. Now, looking a little more in detail, the question often we have to ask is isn't my entrepreneurial mindset important at all? Because if I know that I have to do this process, and especially for, I say this more with no offense to scientists and engineers. Scientists and engineers look at things in a much more process approach, because let's say you're in a chemistry lab, your faculty members probably give you a process and a protocol to follow. If you follow that protocol, you can create a particular compound, right? If you deviate from that process, you're probably going to end up with something much more scary or something much more worse. But entrepreneurship and a mindset is so internal, and it's so unique that each person thinks about entrepreneurial mindset in a very, very unique manner. So the question that we often ask is, who needs an entrepreneurial mindset? And we often say, it's not just entrepreneurs. If you're thinking about being employed in an organization, you still have to have an entrepreneurial mindset, because it is an attitude that you get up and you go to work with. It is an attitude that you get up and go to school with, and you look around and say, how can I contribute? So essentially, it is not just an entrepreneur who's aspiring to create a startup that needs to have an entrepreneurial mindset. It is everybody who lives and breathes air in this world needs an entrepreneurial mindset, because that is what makes the difference between you having fun in your life and achieving things versus not. So when you talk about entrepreneurial mindset, and I gave you a very, very broad brush definition of what a mindset might be. In your world, what do you think are 3 adjectives that will define a mindset? I would appreciate if you want to even unmute and just shout out a word or two. It depends on what protocol your faculty members have for you. Any thoughts? No? Okay. If you're putting it in the chat window, I'm not able to see it because both my screens are blocked. But in the interest of time, let's just go on. So I'm hoping that you probably said being ambitious, thinking of the future, thinking about how to take action, not stopping, always being on the go. These are all different ways that people talk about entrepreneurial mindset, big picture thinking, visualizing large operations, right? And in a simple definition, it's a way of thinking that enables you to overcome challenges, be decisive, and accept responsibility for your outcomes. And it's a constant need to improve your skills, learn from your mistakes, and take continuous action on your ideas. If you notice the definitions here, it doesn't say that you need all these things to create a startup or to be in a company, right? If you take the same definition and say, when I come to St. Teresa's College, I want to have a way of thinking that enables me to overcome challenges, be decisive, and accept responsibility for your outcomes, it will apply. Is there a constant need for you to improve your skills as a student? Yes, of course. Are you going to learn from your mistakes? But obviously, and you want to take action to improve on your ideas, that's the only way to progress, right? So an entrepreneurial mindset is something that's going to be good for you no matter what environment you are going to survive in, right? And I'm going to introduce to you what we call as an entrepreneurial mindset profile. And this is a list of 14 items that are separated into 2 types of activity called personality scales and skill scales. And if you look at scales, they're talking about different types of profile characteristics, such as independence, your tolerance or your need for limited structure, non-conformity. Your parents probably use these words about you, right? You don't like the structure, you are not listening to me. That's non-conformity. It's an entrepreneurial trait. Okay, don't tell your parents that I said that. All right. Risk acceptance, willing to do things that will that has a potential of being perceived risky, always wanting to be action oriented, the passion, no matter what your belief is, the passion to pursue that, and the need to achieve it. These are your personality types. But then when you combine them with the skill scales, having a future focus, being able to generate good ideas. Not only just ideas, create an idea generation is one thing, but to take that step and actually complete it to fruition is the execution skills that you need. The self-confidence, optimism, and persistence that you often need, and the interpersonal sensitivity. Interpersonal sensitivity is something that's very, very unique. It is being empathetic, knowing that whatever action you do, whether it's on the personality scale or the skill scale, will be conscious of how another person's belief systems are going to be influenced. So that's something that we are going to leave out for today because it's too much to handle in one day. Now, if you look at some of the personality scales and personality scales, they are hardwired. That's ingrained in you. Your parents will probably tell you right from a young age, you are probably climbing trees, or you are always independent in your thought and action. Those are things that are hardwired. And each person, that's why you're made unique. But beyond that, there are some skills that you can always acquire. Those are idea generation skills. Future focus, thinking about what are you going to do 5 years from now? What are you going to do 10 years from now? The commitment and the persistence that you need to take wherever your ideas are, taking it to the future and just staying on course no matter what. These are skills that you can acquire. Same things with execution, right? If you try something and it doesn't work, so take something as simple as cooking at home. We all try different recipes. Sometimes it turns out well, sometimes it doesn't. That's clearly an execution failure. If you keep practicing, you will get it. And that's a skill that can be acquired over time. Now, the entrepreneurial mindset, I'm going to engage you in a quick activity that will help you something. Before that, Dr. Nisha, do we have time? Am I running too slow?
Yeah, ma'am. Can you wind up in within 10 to 15 minutes now?
Yeah, I think in the next 10 minutes, 15 minutes, we should be done. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm just checking so that we have time for our activity. So quick activity that's going to follow will help you identify what your mindset is in a very, very non-scientific way. I know it's not right to say that to a group of scientists here, but that's the challenge of the day, is to look at some things and say where your preference lies. It's not going to be an IQ test. You're not going to walk away with a name badge of any kind. It is just for your own internal consumption. All right. And we'll just skip. Now we're going to go into an exercise where we are going to talk about identifying your personality scales, right? And it doesn't, again, as I said, this is not something that there is not going to be an overall score. All it helps you identify your top 2 entrepreneurial mindset profile scales. Okay. Remember back in when we started the webinar, I mentioned that I'd like you to have a pen or a paper. Now is the time to actively use it. Okay. In the next few slide decks, what I'm going to show you are a number of virtual quotes. And because of this being a webinar, I am actually going to direct you to a Qualtrics survey. Just like SurveyMonkey, there will be 5 questions that you will have to answer. And each one is going to be a choice, right? In each question, there will be 5 different quotations that will be shown to you. I want you to write down one which is your favorite slide. Okay, if in each of those slides, let me show you an example. If the question gives you 5 options, I want you to pick the one statement that actually appeals the most to you. Okay, do that 5 times, and then we will have to condense it to just 2. All right. So if you have a phone, or if you're able to quickly scan on another device, scan this QR code and you will see that it takes you to a quick survey where you will see a number of questions. For those of you who don't have the Qualtrics survey or ability to scan, I'm just going to walk you through the questions. So look at these 5 sentences. Identify which one appeals the most to you and write down if for your future use, you can write down this particular statement, but more importantly, write down that particular abbreviation that is at the end of each of those statements. Okay, so first slide, 5 items, go through. Are you all able to scan into a QR device? Do you want me to go back to that QR code again? For those of you who are a little slower picking up that cell phone that you put away, okay, scan the code. There will be 5 questions. In each question, you will have to choose from an option, 5 sentences. Pick your favorite. This is the second grouping. That brings us to the 26. I'm hoping you're keeping pace with that. When you come to the last question, you remember that it will have all the 5. You would have picked all one in each, one quote in each of those questions. Now from that, cross out 3 of them and retain 2. The top 2 that appeal to you. I know it's a very, very difficult choice, but you got to do the exercise. And now we're going to share this with the group, okay? And I'm going to see if I can pull up your active responses. Were you able to access the Qualtrics survey?
Yes, ma'am.
Oh, okay, good. Let me check. I think the results are populating. I thought I will show them the responses. But is this interesting to go through these questions? I know it takes some time to read each one of them.
Ma'am, sometimes you may get few responses over there because most
Fine.
of them have entered through the cell phone.
That's fine. Yeah, and they can do this in their leisure also, right? Now that they have the QR code, they can always take these responses and go through. But what is let's go back to the presentation, and I'll teach them how to interpret it for themselves, so that when they have more time, they can actually do this for themselves. Okay. Going on. Window. So are you able to see my PowerPoint presentation again, or are you still looking at?
Yes, it is visible. Yes.
Okay, good. So once you've completed that exercise, you remember those two abbreviations? Each of those abbreviations correspond to the personality scale or a skill scale. Okay. So after you finish the exercise, the top two abbreviations that you have connect with this. So maybe you want to take a screenshot of this particular slide. And after you've completed the exercise, just go back and compare. A lot of people will probably get independence and idea generation, self-confidence, and action orientation. Those are, when you look at those responses, remember, this is not a scientific assessment. It is more a fun exercise to bring out that inner personality in you. And just think that in any of the activities that you do moving forward for the rest of the year, okay, it's a short time. Now we are already in end of November through December 31st. You follow yourself carefully and say, am I exhibiting those skills that I have identified as my top strengths? It doesn't mean that you don't have other strengths. These are the two most profound ones. Okay, so just this is for your own benefit, for you to think about as you go through. This is a part of a larger, very research-based assessment profile, and you can learn more if you want to go to emindsetprofile.com. This is a very established scientific way of assessing someone's entrepreneurship mindset profile. And if any of you who thinks you want to take it, there is a cost associated. I'm not trying to sell anything here, but if you're so curious, just email me, and I am a certified EMP administrator, so I can implement that as assessment for you and interpret the scale for you. That might be something that you want to consider at some point. Okay. So in terms of the mindset itself, what does it help you is understand ways in which your thinking and acting would be like an entrepreneur, and how it can help you. So that's the one big takeaway from understanding where your mindset is. Next, you have walked away at the end of this exercise to be able to identify and celebrate your own entrepreneurial strengths. So we have some great thinkers amongst us. We have some action-oriented people amongst us. We have some idea generators among us. Just learn to start recognizing that in each other. And as you work in teams, whether today, tomorrow, or any day in the future, think about how that particular strength can help you make an influence. So how are you going to move the needle on any particular task that you take on? That is very important. So that is what the mindset helps you with. Among all the quotes, I'm sure that of the 26 quotes that I showed you, you probably like one or two. I just thought, from the interest of sharing, my own favorite quotation that I always like is, many ideas grow better when transplanted into another mind than in the one in which they sprang up. And this is probably something that a lot of educators will like, because that is what we do on an everyday basis. We create these new ideas and we come and share it with our students so that they can benefit from it in the future. So I'm going to end on that note. Leave it open to Q&A at this time. You have my contact detail. Otherwise, Dr. Nisha or Dr. Jaya can help you access that information. Okay, for now, let me stop presenting. And hopefully, this was a good exercise for you. Glad to answer any questions. Whatever you do, no matter what career you pursue, be entrepreneurial in your thinking, because if you are not entrepreneurial, and even if you work for a big company, everyday things that are ways for you to bring your new ideas and better ways of doing things. And that is what will be a sure short way of being progressive, a sure short way of ensuring that you are making a positive impact on the life and the work around you. All right. I want to say thanks to Dr. Nisha and Dr. Jaya for inviting me. Let's open up for questions. If students, don't be shy. As they said, I worked in India for a long time, so I have engaged a lot with undergraduate students, and I enjoy that, and I do that even today. So feel free to reach out and ask questions.
I have a question, ma'am. If
Yes.
I need to start a startup, do we have to register as a company first, or what is the first step, like to start a startup?
I would say the first one is to have a good idea. If you remember, go back to that slide where you having a good solid idea that fills a gap is the most important thing. So it's like if you walk into a store, there are 10 different items of the same model. Let's say I want to get a iron box, right? How many companies are already making one? If you also want to jump into the fray and say, I'm going to make a better iron box, right? What is that unique thing about your product that will make somebody come to the stop and say, I want to buy this, right? So you are bridging a gap. So what you need first do is look at an assessment of what are the products in the market, right? And then you say, what are these products not meeting in terms of my need? And you start building a product or an idea that fills that gap in the market. Once you know that that's a viable idea, then you start setting up a company.
Okay, ma'am.
Okay.
And then also about the funding. Nowadays, the main problem is getting the funded. So that is
And
the
it is a big problem. So oftentimes funding is a situation or an issue which becomes much more magnified when your idea is not valid, when you are not able to sell your idea to a small group of people, right? Then why will somebody back you? So you have to show that your idea is good. And once your idea is really viable and people see that it has the potential to address a huge market need, then it makes a big difference. Just think about a few startups. Why is Uber successful, right? Because first of all the autos were expensive. Even if you put the meter, nobody was you never had to pay by the meter. So people were sick and tired of bargaining and negotiating when you jump into either a taxi or an auto. So what Uber did was took that negotiation out of the business, and they said, I'm putting the power back in the hands of the customer, right? And once you are able to show that that is unmet need, that's a craving of the customer that you're coming in to join, venture capitalists will be glad to support you, right? Because they see the value in it. But then there are simple ways in which, as an early startup, before you go to a venture capital, there are lots of steps in iterating and refining your idea and refining your idea. That is where university-based incubators are really useful for student entrepreneurs. If you have an idea, go and affiliate with an incubator because they will give you access to resources that you cannot have as a startup company of your own. Government provides a lot of seed funding for small and medium-sized businesses, right? So that is another source for you to think about. But it all goes back to creating that beautiful entrepreneurial idea that meets the need of what the audience wants.
okay, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am.
Other
Hello,
questions?
ma'am.
Yes, Sophia.
Ma'am, I have noticed that most of the successful entrepreneurs, they come from a business family. Maybe it's my thought, but so I want to ask you, is entrepreneurship an inborn talent or something like a skill that we can acquire through proper training, especially like as the science students?
Yes, science students, you have a great asset because you've got like a good functioning brain, right? It is entrepreneurship is never a genetic thing, right? Because for every entrepreneur that came from a business family, you can show an example of somebody who came from nothing right? Without this family support, it is enabling because it allows that buffer. Dr. Jaya, she asked the question about funding, right? So if you come from a family which is affluent in resources, you probably have a cushion where you don't have to worry about the next meal on the table while you're pursuing your entrepreneurial idea. Instead, when you go back home, your mom is going to serve you a good meal, right? So that gives you the flexibility to go a little further and test the limits. But just because you come from a business family, if you have a bad idea, it's never going to take off, right? It is ultimately, I always bring back to this one big aspect of what is that unmet need? Where is that solution you're providing? So it is not bestowed upon people who come from business families. It is not, unlike in India where some things run in families and you can be an astrologer only if your parents were an astrologer. Entrepreneurship is not like that, right? It's a free for all. Be aware of your circumstances. Look around and see where there is opportunity for you to contribute. And no matter what your background is, no caste, no creed, you can be a successful entrepreneur. Does that answer your question, Sophia?
Thank you, ma'am.
It all boils down to your thought process, your mindset. And that is why right now, entrepreneurship as a field of study itself is moving more towards tapping that innate potential in each person. And that's why when Dr. Nisha told me we're going to talk about careers, I stepped back from saying, go and apply in these places or go to these places. I pulled back the whole conversation to how do you make it relevant to each person? Because each one of you come with such rich background and versatile backgrounds that I cannot give you a sure short path to success. I cannot give you a formula for success, but I can tell you how each of you can identify your own personal formula. Okay, and I know for scientists that's a very weird thing. Dr. Nisha is probably thinking, "Oh my God, what is she doing?" Because scientists, you come with this beautiful thought process. There is always a clear definition of your path, and then there is a recipe for success. That's why chemistry labs exist, right? For you to practice that experiment, observation, and inference. Entrepreneurship is also an experiment, but there are no pre-decided chemicals involved. There is no sure short way to success. You've got to figure it out on your own. You can look at others for inspiration, but each person's enabling environment is very, very different. Keep that spirit of open-mindedness and entrepreneurial thinking every day. Wake up, and if you found your strength, call that into action every day, and you'll see that your life becomes different. Other questions? I know we are well past our time, but I appreciate you taking the time to stay back. I hope you found this useful.
If no more questions,
Sure,
shall we
ma'am,
wind up?
actually.
I think there is no more questions. So let's move on. Thank you so much, ma'am, for enlightening us with your valuable words. Now I request Ms. Navya of 3rd DC to propose the vote of thanks.
Good evening to one and all gathered here. It is with great pleasure that I propose a vote of thanks for this auspicious occasion held today. First of all, let me thank Almighty for guiding us and enlightening us through today's event. On behalf of the Department of Chemistry and Center for Research, in association with Institutional Innovation Council IIC and Theresian IEDC, I express my sincere gratitude to the resource person of the day, Dr. Sandhya Balasubramanian, who despite her busy schedule has found time for us to grace this occasion and to throw us with a truly valuable insight into entrepreneurship and innovation as career opportunity. Thank you, ma'am, for providing this informative session. Further, I thank the head of the chemistry department, Dr. Jayati Verki, for her immense contribution to make this event a grand success. I also like to thank the IIC and the Theresian IEDC in collaborating with us to reach this event to its greatest heights. I extend my regards and to all the faculty members and student coordinators whose fruitful cooperation has led this event being momentous. Last but not the least, let me thank all the teaching and non-teaching staffs and to all my dear friends whose presence truly marked this event victorious. Thank you all.
Thank you, Navya. Once again, thank you one and all for your valuable participation in this international workshop. With these words, I would like to wind up the webinar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sandhya ma'am. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Be in touch. All right. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank
ma'am.
you. Thank you, ma'am.
Bye.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Nisha, recording stop ചെയ്താലോ നമുക്ക്?
ഒരു മിനിറ്റ്. സ്റ്റോപ്പ് ചെയ്തു മിസ്സേ.
ഒരു എക്സിറ്റ് ആകാനുണ്ട്. ജോസ്ഫിൻ